Say yes.
Ready.
Go.
Okay. Calling to order Monday, March 4th, council committee meeting. Roll call. We have Councilor Powers, Councilor Demerit, Councilor Marks, Councilor Berthasell, Councilor
Fairway.
Blairway.
Wow.
Rob was the only one that came to mind.
Yeah.
And Councilor Kenny. Councilor Wingard is not here, so I will be vice chair today, running the meeting. Finance and Operation Committee, we have a pool construction update.
All right. So I want to start with a little bit of background as to what has happened to the pool recently. So last summer, we had closed in August in plans to put a gutter system on the top. So that, if you visited our pool before, that is that metal stainless steel thing that wraps around and that helps filter the water and bring it back into the pump room. So it was time, the gutters were about 30 years old. We were leaking water. It was on the schedule. It was time for the gutters to be done. As part of this process, Public Works prepared the surface. So there's some nice pictures of them digging holes and just running the concrete around the pool, those pretty colors. And prepping the site for the contractors to come in and put the gutter in. The first step in that process was cutting the actual pool wall down. And that sounds very extreme, but it was part of the scheduled plan. More modernized gutters are a different sort of size. So to keep the pool flush with the ground, we had to cut down the wall to install these gutters, which was standard to the contract. That was something we knew that was going to happen and we knew it was going to be that way. To cut the pool wall down, what we had done is town staff has pulled back the liner and pulled back the felt pieces. So the pool itself is a concrete wall and then felt lining and then the PVC, and that's what you touch when you swim, is that blue PVC liner. So we were under the impression at the time that we could stretch this liner back out and reuse it once those gutters were fitted onto the concrete wall. The gutter installation went well. It has been air tested. So as far as where we have not been able to run water through it yet, as the end of pool season happened, as construction happened, the process of end of August through mid-October about. So not really an appropriate time to run water with things starting to freeze. So as far as we're aware, the gutters have gone nicely and are sat in place. This was brought to council because we have found with new information and new management of the project, the pool liner is not able to be re-stretched back into that shape. It has lost elasticity and has sustained damage through the construction, just with regular debris and some of the scaffolding we had to put in on the deep end because it does go 12 feet down on the deep end. So staff had gotten some background information on quotes of professionals who install pool liners and have brought this in front of council, knowing that the pool season is coming up shortly, especially with nice days we have like today on our mind.
Okay.
Thank you for that report. I can go through yes, on the memo I had presented to council, there were two quotes attached. One of the quotes was for about $140,000. The other quote was for $91,000 for contracted services. No matter which contracted service we're looking at, the groundwork and the surface work can be done by Public Works. So once the liner's put in, we will need to fill those holes and remade and put concrete back on top. And that can be done by our staff, and that's the adjusted cost for that. And that is what the ground/surface work is, our staff, and that's what.
Both quotes.
Yes, so it doesn't matter the price of the quote.
Yeah.
The price of the ground and surface work would be the same for either one.
Okay. Are there any, is that it, Megan? For us?
Yeah, that's the background and that's the information, the cost information on either quote. If you have specific questions on quotes, please do let me know.
Anyone have any questions?
Some questions.
Thoughts?
Do you have expectations on when the project could be completed? Would be in time for a swimming season or such it is?
So neither contractor wanted to confirm without, confirmation of a contract of when exactly they'd be able to come in. The contractor that was able to provide more information to me was the Renosis one for $91,000. They were fairly confident that we would be able to swim this season. Maybe with a bit of a delay, but they were confident that they just needed to know as soon as possible. The other contractor I spoke with wasn't as eager to providing any information in one direction or another, which does make sense based on their workloads and their schedules of pool expertise.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like one of these quotes is both cheaper and we have some more helpful information about it. I'm curious if there are any trade-offs that you see, having spoken with and been more involved in this process, or any reasons that the higher bid would be preferable?
Not from what I've read or the information I have gathered. I will say I did press both of them pretty hard on that exact question of when they would be open. So again, that was all just words that they had let me know. But they both understood the condition of the current pool and the fact that the liner parts of it is still in here. So they both had a really good understanding of what was here. We provided pictures and information. So they're both well aware of the condition we have.
So this was in the,
Yeah.
this was in the paper and I shared it with the parents listserv group that we had. It's always so responsive, and the response I received was overwhelming. I think 15 people got back to me this afternoon. All of them were, 14 to 15, I think, were, open the pool. We had one person who suggested river swimming is an alternative that maybe we should look at. I think a couple of you may have been copied on that response. But I'm happy to share these with people, but it was just such a really strong support for the pool. And I think these kinds of things, it's unfortunate, you set up a schedule, a maintenance schedule, but these are old systems we're dealing with, and I can totally appreciate how tough it is for staff. You open it up and that's when you figure out what you're really working with, I would assume. So I really appreciate staff bringing us this to our attention and give us an opportunity to act on it. And hopefully if we could act next week and, maybe I don't know if there's a chance, I know you drive a hard bargain, Cornell. I don't know if there's a chance that we could make something contingent on the work being done in time for the summer or something like that, if you think. Maybe Leo drives a harder bargain, I don't know, but.
Yeah, maybe depending on, not that we'd probably be interested in paying the additional 50, but I did have a question that I had asked about Davis-Bacon wages, and I think the cheaper ones did not include Davis-Bacon wages. And my question is, with these funds, do we have to be paying Davis-Bacon wages?
No.
No?
That is my understanding. Our understanding is no.
Okay.
Can you explain what you're talking about, Leo, to the rest of us?
So like all the school projects that
Yeah.
we're done, you have to adhere to Davis-Bacon wages. It's I don't know if it's a union thing or what it is, honestly, but it's a wage, construction wage that you have to adhere to for certain funds. But if
We're
we don't.
using federal money.
Thank
federal
you.
money,
Thank you.
Which if we do use
ARPA.
ARPA money, that is federal money.
Yes, that's our understanding. That wouldn't apply to.
Okay. My other question was about did we reach out to I asked how long, just to get a sense for what the cycle of these things were, and Megan provided. This thing had the original one had a 15-year warranty. It's 17 years out. Obviously, we've got construction going on. I wasn't even considering that this thing would still be under warranty or anything. I was just curious to know, like, how long is this gonna last? Because both quotes say 10-year warranty on the product. I'm curious, it was 39.7 back when we did it in 2007. Was it 7?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep,
so
2007.
it's gone up a little bit, understandably. we're not gonna get, we're gonna get that rate, but I was curious if we did reach out to that same vendor. Only because, not only just because they've done it before, and also because then they had a 15-year warranty, which is obviously advantageous for us.
So per our records, that was what we had to provide was the information I had sent Cornell, which he had given to you
Mhm.
earlier today. When you do check out that website, I don't have confirmation, but it looks like the original contract might have worked in tandem with other companies to provide such services included. More like an architect would give you information, not do the construction themselves. So when you check out their information,
Nater,
yes, and I did that briefly. I'm happy to get back to you with more information, but with a brief overview. It seemed like they were a little bit more project level management than a physical application, if you will.
okay.
But I'm happy to
But
get
we
back to you.
think
Yeah.
this is the same. The liner company actually did the work. We think it's the same.
Yes, so with my conversations with the Renosis contractor, and previous staff, they all remembered this company. The Renosis person I spoke to specifically claimed to remember this pool and claimed to be the one that installed it
Oh,
all
really?
those years ago. So I'm led to believe that that was the case, that this was some sort of agreement that over.
That was all. I'm just, because it looked also like, the Renosis company manufactures the actual liner. I couldn't tell from the other quote if they actually manufacture the liner or not. Do you know?
I don't know. That's just the information provided in the quote.
So there, it's gonna be custom made.
It
It's not like
yeah.
there's one of these sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
They're gonna bring the materials with them and make it.
Oh, either or are gonna
It
do
doesn't
that.
matter. Yeah,
That's
this is a custom job.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, gotcha.
I
So,
I just had one or two, it's good to know that we think that was Renosis and we didn't have any real problems with the liner, right? That 15 years worked out as far as I know. And then I was just curious about the kiddie pool. Was there problems with that too? Because at one time we weren't using the kiddie pool and I don't remember if it was used last year or not.
It was not used last year. They are, and on kind of the capital planning budget information, you'll see that it's its own section. The kiddie pool system is a little bit different from the pool system itself, so that's kind of a different conversation in terms of management of the kiddie pool. I know they're next to each other, but in terms of,
I
managing.
wasn't sure if that
They're a
was a
little bit
liner issue too with that one or why it wasn't being used. I just didn't know, so.
yeah,
Right.
the original quote looks like they maybe did the kiddie pool and the,
Looks like they
other
did it at
ones.
once.
I
Mhm.
just to give, I guess, feedback overall, my take on whether we do this is that this is such a community asset that we will never have again if we don't maintain it. So I feel like unfortunately, unfortunately, I feel like it's maintenance that has to be done if we want to keep the pool. And for me, that one's pretty easy. Easy take, easy decision.
I also love the pool. I am curious, I see we have members of the public here, so if any of you would like to speak on this issue, is that premature, Leo? or-
Yeah, I was gonna
I
make
just-
sure that everyone.
I just wanted to know if like the liner of, well, if that's a totally separate, Rob, that's a total, that the little pool or you guys, that's a totally separate thing that's gonna have to be done separately. And if it's fixed, will we have to get I'm just wondering if could we get the liner for that? But it sounds like that's just a bigger issue, so we can't like have them come and do the liner too, because I have a feeling that would be a lot cheaper. I don't know.
The way we have managed the current pool construction with the outfitting the gutters and the current capital plan we're on, we've identified them as separate projects is all, so.
But Matt, are you asking
I'm
whether
saying-
we would get a cheaper rate on the
Yeah.
liner if we combine the two projects?
Yeah, that's
Is that
what I'm
you're-
trying to, does it make sense to try and finish the little pool right now? But if
That would be additional work. There are some plumbing issues with the little pool as well. I think it would be premature to add a new liner, whereas we have to do
Well, yeah.
construction and rip it out.
I
Right
saw
this second.
Rob shake his head when you
Yeah,
asked the
that's-
question too, so
That's.
I assume that there's.
Yeah, I would assume there's a lot of issues that probably would have come up. I'd love to see that pool fixed too, but
Yeah.
we can, but get the big pool done and then we'll deal with that other one. But I was just wondering if we could save some money by,
Is that our commission, the kiddie pool? I haven't.
There are additional kind of plumbing and infrastructure situations with the kiddie pool, which is why they were separated out that way. So to do both liners right now with the possibility of. Okay.
Understood.
Yeah.
Is the pool not, did we not have it operational last year? I got my white ring last
Oh,
year,
it-
so I don't even go to that kiddie pool. anymore.
Yeah, it was not in operations last year. An adjustment we did make for the public was we have allowed, where in the past we didn't. We have allowed life jackets and Coast Guard approved swimming devices in the larger pool. So those that might have trouble swimming don't lose an opportunity as well.
Does anyone?
I have one more question. I'm assuming the answer to this one's obvious, but I just want to ask to check, when you describe the damage on the current liner, I'm assuming that that wasn't the fault of whatever company came in to do the other work when you described the damage from the scaffolding and all that, that wasn't an error on their part. I just wanted to be sure it's not something they're financially responsible for in any way.
I think we were as careful as possible, but with the amount of construction that occurred, a project like this hadn't been done in over 30 some odd years. I think there were some contingencies that happened to have happened, and the liner had suffered more than just being ripped off and shrinking. There are other issues with it as well.
Thanks, just wanted to confirm, and I agree with everyone else, the pool's a priority for the community. I think we need to do it.
and then I just have one that's, Rob, you may not have been able to look at these two companies, but if you have, do you have a preference? Cause you were much more like knowledgeable than I'll ever be on this kind of stuff. Like if we, which of these two companies you would,
I would support whatever Megan is.
okay. Megan, you tell me, I'll vote for it.
Let's hear from some people.
General public, if you could state your name.
Hi, Erin Lanigan, town resident, I guess now is all I am. There's one thing you guys can get me out for, it's the pool. I think the last meeting I attended was the pool as well. Very strong supporter of community pools in any way, shape or form. And while I love hearing everything that's being said, the questions being asked, whether we should be doing these things at the same time, et cetera, we have not met. And I apologize, I probably should have at some point. I would really love to continue the community conversation in talking about how to not only fix the pool for continuous use, as it is a huge community producer of time, energy, community resources, et cetera, but I'd also like to start the discussion about improvements, changes that we can make, especially with the kiddie pool. I think that it is one of the few places that I can honestly say I have met most young parents. And I have quite a few of them in my life for some reason. And although the pool is wonderful for what it is, we are now doing continual maintenance rather than considering how we can make it more of a community, not playground, but meeting place. So I would just like to open it up to that conversation, not tonight, obviously, but consider that while we are having to do these large maintenance issues, maybe there's more that we can do with it. And I would be happy to, I mean, I know almost all of you, so you're happy to call me up if you want to. Tons and tons and tons of ideas and how we can make it more of a community feature.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah, is it okay if I respond briefly to Erin?
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing, and also note that last week we had a group here that is a neighborhood group that's been organizing around the boat launch down in the basin, and had brought to council some kind of like ideas for how to make that space, kind of as you suggest the pool could be, more an even greater community resource. And so anyway, I just sort of flagged that as a model for the potential for community members who are passionate about a particular facility or space to kind of get together and bring ideas to us. I think that would be tremendous.
And I love that idea, just to respond, but
Yeah.
I had a heart attack in December.
Yeah.
So a lot on my
Maybe
plate
not
right
you
now.
right at this moment, but other folks who are listening in, do feel empowered to think about what would be wonderful to you and talk to us about it.
Okay, thank you.
There are still some, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 left in grant request funds for the for that program that people could also look at.
Yeah.
Leveraging the pool with those kinds of funds perhaps, but any further comment from the public?
So for that, Leo, you
I
might.
guess I'll say something. I'm Megan Dean, just a town resident, and I didn't really plan on coming here today or talking, but here I am. But I agree with everything that Aaron said, and especially it's like a gathering place for the community. And I met Erica and a bunch of other moms there last summer. And it was just like a safe place for us to all be. Your kids are outside, they're enjoying the outdoors, and I also would like to see maybe at another time, more to talk more about the pool and maybe lessons being brought back and for another day. But I would also help with fundraising or doing anything to help, earn money for the pool. So I think a lot of parents feel very strongly about supporting the pool and keeping it, going forward with it. So that's it.
Thank you.
And you can have a pool foundation.
Any additional comments from the public? Not looking at you. Yeah, I was,
Okay.
what I was referring to is if someone wanted to create an event that was involved
Right.
with the pool or
I just thought
something.
you might want to clarify that when you said the certain amount of money left, you meant for the mini grants. So that's more like for applying for an event that might, or a small thing. It could be not an event, it could be an object. But the idea is like 1,000 and less,
Yes,
right? But if there is some idea that a community event or a object that would be 1,000 or less, that would increase community at the pool, the mini grants are an
Right.
option, is what you were talking.
yeah,
Okay.
whether it be like a pizza party, which,
Right.
or maybe you can't do that. at the pool. I won't get ahead of myself. Some type of event that could use a little bit of support from with finances, there's that option, the mini grants. So that was it. So for this, are we going to move this to the next meeting and we'll discuss or we'll vote on, is that what we're doing? Voting on,
They're in order for next week.
okay, yeah. It seems,
Assuming the lower cost bid, right? I mean, everybody-
I can't see any reason
So-
not to.
Even without, if you take out the number, this company has been to this before. They have done a job that we have been happy with in the past, so I would continue the recommendation that is in the memo.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome.
Thank you for
Thank you,
bringing it to
Megan.
us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, public. Item B, fiscal year 2025 budget presentation discussion.
So, Zach and I have met with, Councilor Marks and Councilor Kenny about, some changes to the presentation for the 25 budget, and, she has shared, a list of possible, areas of information, to present, and Zach and I have met, reviewed, and he thinks he can do a lot of these things. And we just want to make sure that the rest of the council was on board with this, and if you are, then we'll get to work on presentation for next month.
I thought it looked great and very helpful. I appreciate you all sort of thinking this through and staff for being receptive and able to pull this off.
We rely on Sarah and Leo a lot for their interest and expertise in these matters in terms of what kind of information that we'd want to have. And I think I appreciate all the work that goes into it already, and definitely think I know I'm comfortable following their lead in terms of where we want to go. And does it feel like it's, well, I guess, Zach, how involved were you with our budget? When did you on board? You were here with the budget last year, right? So you.
Yep, I was here at the budget last year. I've been involved with the budget at various levels throughout my time here, because as my position's changed, I've taken on more roles in different places.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty familiar with the budget. I can certainly put all sorts of reports and spreadsheets and things together.
Okay.
It's something I enjoy doing, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to tackle the project.
Does it feel like this is less production than what we got? Then we got the really big binders last year and took a lot of staff time and a lot of. Does it feel like it's less production or?
We hope
Yeah.
so. I will say thanks to Zach there was a long list and Zach, pretty much, a lot of them were like, yep. And there's just a little discussion about a few of them, but, so appreciate, Zach's ability and willingness to take a look at those and bring them to the front for us.
And Zach was pretty amazing at the meeting. So just to be on record saying that.
Yeah, I also feel really good about this plan for how we move through the budget this year.
And we are gonna, when we get to the end of the budget, when we present, we're gonna wanna present, the council is gonna wanna ultimately present the budget, I think.
Yeah.
And, we can talk further about what that looks like. Last year, we did, staff did a version and then we did a version, and that seemed cumbersome. And we prefer to work with staff to lead, to present a council budget as we get ready to ask the town for their feedback on what it is and council's consideration towards final passage. Does that make sense to people? And I'm happy to discuss or get pushback if, staff wants to go out first. I would encourage that, but happy to talk about alternatives, but that's feels like what we learned is coming out of last year's discussion, presentations.
And is there, I mean, that's the end of June, well, no, beginning of June maybe or something. Is there a chance that we would have a new town manager by then? I don't, I guess. But so that might help anyway, just that someone might just be coming on. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I do think ultimately it's the town council are the folks who were elected to put together and vote to approve a budget, and so it feels appropriate to me for us to be the ones who present and have to defend that before the public. So I feel good about us kind of doing the work of presenting it.
Yeah, and I think that only changes, well, that changes the process towards the end. But
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
pretty
the rest
pretty
is
minor.
how it will be done.
Yeah.
There should be just one presentation. to the public.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And looking at the schedule that Cornell so nicely gave us last time, it looks like the council public hearing, I know Zach worked on this too, is currently scheduled for June 10th. So that's what we'd be looking at to have that presentation ready to go by June 10th, right? I did have one question just on the schedule, once I was looking back at the documents. I know we looked at the schedule last week, but I just wanted to backtrack a minute. On the schedule you gave us, it says on April 22nd, the budget summary documents will be sent to counselors and the public, and then on April 25th, the budget workbooks. And I wasn't entirely clear what the summary documents were. Is that my list, or is that, Leo, the list we created, or is that something different? I just wasn't sure, and I'm aware that 1 week later, we have our first council budget workshop on the 29th. So as much as anything, I want to flag that for my fellow counselors that it's a fast turnaround. I guess, maybe it's not possible this year, but like going forward, I would really like to try to see us get our budget workbooks to council like 2 weeks before our first budget discussion, because it's a lot to go through. You guys have been looking at it for months, but we get it then. And in that first meeting is where we really look at the overview and the revenue projections and all of these big scale documents that Zach is so nicely working to present us this year. But I remember last year, it's very fast to get this on the 25th and need to talk big picture 4 days later. It's a lot to go through in 4 days. So I don't know if it's possible for us to push that back a week earlier. And if not, I want to flag it for fellow counselors, like we're going to have to really be prepared to really do our work on those 4 days and come into that first meeting really ready to look at those big overview documents and think strategically about the budget. I think last year we talked a little bit of concern about jumping so fast into individual department discussions and not having enough time scheduled to really talk big picture about what the overall big picture was looking like for the year. And, those documents that give us the data over time for 5 years, the state data and all of that. Last year, we felt like there wasn't much time budgeted for that discussion, and we jumped really fast into the weeds and kind of the nitty gritty of each department. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know if anyone else is, like, just, do we have enough time with that and doing general government all in one meeting? Or is anyone else concerned about any of that? I just want to throw it out.
I haven't gotten to the point where I'm concerned about it yet, so.
Yeah,
I,
and I think that's more a function of me not thinking about it on the level of detail yet that you are, Sarah, so I appreciate your foresight there, but
I would echo that. I haven't thought about schedule wise either, but I think it's a valid point to raise. And I don't know. When it says formatted and printed, no changes, April 15th. Does that mean by the 22nd? Is that sort of what that means? Or that mean, if it were formatted and printed by the 15th?
Could we get it then?
Yeah, that's, I guess, is my question. Is there any reason we wouldn't just get it then?
I think some of that language is left over from when we were doing the big budget book,
Uh-huh.
and that was a little bit more of an undertaking.
So, yeah,
Um,
collated. I remember all the Nancy in there with, you know, for probably days, assembling.
Does that mean we could maybe get a digital version as council on the 15th, even if printed ones aren't available yet?
I will put it as a deadline on my calendar and get as close as I can to it.
Or the summer. I mean, I'd be interested to see the summer up front too. I guess. I don't know.
And Cornell, do you know, can you clarify for us what the difference is between the summary documents and the rest of the documents? The two different categories on here?
I assume it was one of those spreadsheets
Okay,
you've
one of the ones that we had last year.
put in.
Okay.
To give you an indication of how things are looking in
Okay.
that more detail a few days later. But we'll try to get it out as we can, but
Okay.
Zach and I are still both fairly. This,
It's all good. I just thought it was helpful to bring it up now and not at the last minute, you know,
Yeah.
that it was a crunch in the time. We talked about it a lot last year, all of us. So if it is possible to get it on the 15th or 16th or 18th or whenever, it's helpful. And I guess my question on the overview and the revenue projections, which is the first part of our discussion on the 29th. I mean, hopefully that goes swimmingly and it's easy peasy this year, but you never know. If that's hard and we have to bump the discussion of the general government section into the next week, is that just what we would do then?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Very helpful.
So does it make sense to, in our shared drive that we had last year, there was an FY24 budget document. So it makes, I assume, will that be the same thing we'll get this year in terms of like, you know, things come in as part of agendas. So the documents, Sarah was just talking about the town of Orono 24-24-5 budget process timeline was part of an agenda. I found it in like the committee meeting from a week or 2 weeks ago. I assume we could grab all those things in one folder so we could track it. So we can go to one place when we want to see everything as opposed to looking through different meeting. Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
That was great last year and really helpful.
so we can just put it on that drive.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that was great last year. Super helpful. Thanks.
Any further thoughts or questions on the budget? Council. Well, thank you very much, Zach and Cornell. Item 3, Town Manager Search Committee. Discuss the town manager search.
Yeah, 2 seconds. So this was emailed to all of you last Monday, but in case anybody didn't have it, these were the, I still have this emailed last Monday about questions to talk about today. Okay. A lot of the beginning of this is just a review of the things that we already agreed on at previous meetings or were already informed of by SGR at previous meetings. That's just the background points. And then I tried to label the things we need to make decisions on tonight. I'm happy to read back on the background points if people need that reviewed or if everyone feels like they got that. There's nothing on there that we haven't voted on at a previous meeting or been updated on already at a previous meeting by SGR or by you and I reporting back out what SGR had told us. The first decision that we need to make has to do with our process for reviewing semifinalist candidates. The last time we discussed this at our January 29th meeting when Lissa was here visiting, we talked about 2 ways to review semifinalist candidates. One was to watch video recordings of their interviews, and the other was to listen only to audio recordings of their interviews. As a council, we talked about that. We talked about there being some anti-bias benefits potentially to only audio listening, but also some drawbacks because there's a lot about this job that's forward facing. And also there's a lot about people's body language that's easier to read in video recordings. And council had unanimously stated at the time, although it was not any kind of vote because we were in a committee meeting, that we would prefer to watch the video recordings, but we asked Sonia to check with the DEIB committee for feedback on the issue as well, since it had to do with potential bias mitigation. So Sonia, as requested, brought that to the DEIB committee in February and then sent us a follow-up email with recommendations back from the DEIB committee, which is included here word for all of you. I don't know, Sonia, do you want to say something about this section? And then I can speak about my conversation Leo and I had with Lissa, kind of responding.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's one DEIB committee member in particular who has sort of done a lot of research on this subject, and her advice to us was that indeed sort of seeing people's faces and bodies does add a layer of judgment that can inevitably impact the implicit biases we all carry, but there are some ways she knows from her research to mitigate the impact of this, including having all of us have good rubrics with sort of quantitative measurements that we use after watching the video by ourselves and before we talk about it. So that, and then another additional layer that takes more time, but is better yet in terms of kind of mitigating potential bias, is to do both in audio and video recording. So like listen to what a candidate has to say with audio only first, fill out your rubric, and then follow up and watch the video and note any additional things that you notice by seeing their body language and how they present themselves that way. So, and she said that she's happy to look over our evaluation rubrics with sort of a diversity lens if that is helpful to us. So I'm reporting this back as some additional information we've gotten. Yep.
Thanks. And I think we should add that when you say has some expertise in this, has a lot of academic expertise in this, has a PhD, is a professor on campus, and has written many papers about bias in interviewing.
Yeah.
And so then Leo and I brought this together in our Zoom conversation with Lissa, to Lissa, and had sent her ahead of time the message from the DIB committee. And Lissa responded back to us, basically saying that that it's SGR's practice would be in many ways in line with this, but in one way not. So the ways it would be in line with this would be that it would be asking people to view the recordings and listen to the recordings on their own prior to any discussion. So that fits exactly with the recommendations coming from the DEIB committee. And also asking us to listen first and then go back a second time and watch. So we would do this on our own time, not during a group meeting. We would ask, they would ask us to first listen and then watch. So those two things would be 100% in line with the recommendations. The part that's different is that Lissa responded by telling us that SGR does not recommend using a preset rubric. She explained that that is because they really believe that one of the biggest strengths of elected government is that everyone has very different priorities and very different perspectives, and that's part of how elected government works. And creating a preset rubric is sort of kind of forcing everybody into watching for the same things. I understand there's other ways to, potentially think of that, but that's sort of how she explained it. So their recommendation would be that instead of having a preset rubric, that they would recommend that each counselor and every advisory committee member also read through our job brochure, which we developed in detail with SGR, and perhaps our community survey document also, and basically create our own rubric for ourselves before we then listen to the interviews once and then go back a second time and watch the interviews. So it would follow most of what was suggested there. The part that would be different is it wouldn't be a pre-created rubric or a pre-vetted rubric. So that is what we are bringing back to council for any discussion, and You know, are we comfortable with that plan or how do people feel?
It sounds like a reasonable way to sort of merge all of our different people recommending things. And I'm glad to hear that there's so much overlap between sort of the process that we were already sort of gearing up to get into and what our DIV committee member recommended. And I think that that small change of setting up for ourselves a personal rubric for what we're looking for makes a lot of sense and feels like it isn't too cumbersome either.
That feels fine to me too. I guess I'm curious if any members of the public have feedback on that.
Like to go to the public before we have our council discussion, don't you?
I do. I thought Belinda made a face at the point, so I just figured I'd open it up, but it's still, you don't need to share.
Did you
I think-
watch your body language and pick something up?
Actually, but it's all right.
I think it makes sense to have the council discussion and then do the.
Sure.
You wanna go? You have a,
I think that the SGR suggestion made a lot of sense to me, and the reason why is because I want us not to yes, bias ourselves from one strong individual saying this is how the rubric should be. That's all. And I think we're all strong individuals, so we probably wouldn't, but let's just start off with that being the way it is, and we'll come to it as individuals and then come together after we scored our candidates and hash it out from there.
I think that makes sense to me, so.
We do.
What comment, Leo, now?
Yeah, public comment if anyone has.
Yeah, I guess just hearing the response from SGR, that was a really kind of interesting viewpoint. I hadn't really thought of that before. So, but I do like where that's coming from. So I like the SGR.
Thank you. All right, so we sound like we have consensus on that. We're good to move forward with the SGR plan as described. Great. Leo and I can let Lisa know that, right? The second decision, I know it seems like a long way off, but is around the structure of the actual on-site candidate interview day, which would happen that first week in May. So this is the day when all the finalists would come to Orono and would be moving around to different interview stations. There could be 2 people here, there could be 3, there could be 4, I don't know. But whatever number there is, they would move from station to station. And Lisa has suggested for us the following stations. She said she likes to have a question and answer session with senior staff. She would recommend that Jeff, who we all met when Lisa was here, Jeff came also. He's the one who's training with Lisa, would be there to help facilitate that session. She recommends that our advisory committee members participate in viewing a PowerPoint presentation done by the candidates. I think the typical prompt for this is something along the lines of what would your vision be for Orono in the next 6 months or 12 months, or what would you want to accomplish in your first 6 or 12 months? We have some ability as a council later to pick the exact prompt and what time period we want to give people. And she said she likes this to be the advisory committee because this is a great chance for them to basically do what they would do as members of the public. If, you know, the manager was making a PowerPoint presentation, the kinds of questions they would have, and to really basically not even role play, just be themselves as if they're at a public meeting and asking their questions in response to that PowerPoint presentation. And then there's a formal interview that she would recommend the council itself do at their station. And then the 4th one would be a tour of the town. She said that part's often led by a staff member. I was wondering, given that we had such fabulous candidates for our advisory search committee and we're not able to choose all of them because of how many there were and our limits on numbers, whether this might be a great thing to have one staff and one community member who volunteered for the advisory committee, but might currently only be an alternate, or even were maybe not appointed, and maybe even not a 3rd person who might have some university expertise. So as a little pod driving around together because we're walking. We realized during the tour with Lisa that having someone who understands the university is really important when you're doing the university part of the tour. Not everybody does. So that question is an aside we can come back to. the basic question here is how do people feel about these different stations? There had been some talk earlier on council about maybe not having everything so separated, like not having all senior staff in one meeting and all council in another and all of the advisory committee in a third. But if you look at the paragraph after, she gave us a lot of detail explaining that there is a lot of written feedback that's elicited from each staff person and advisory group member in their group, and that feedback is brought back to council for us to consider along with our formal interview part. And that neither senior staff nor the advisory committee are asked to, they're never asked to like rate the candidates in order or tell us what their first candidate is. Instead, there's very specific things like pros and cons and questions they have and follow-up things they want us to ask. And so it wouldn't create a scenario where one group might be saying, we really like candidate A, and another group might be saying, no, we really want D, and a third group might be saying, really, it has to be F. And not being able to talk to each other about those differences, that wouldn't happen, if that makes sense. There'd also be a meet and greet for the whole community one night as part of this process, and they would also be allowed to give written feedback that would come back to council. And SGR indicated that this is the process they've typically used and that they've found it work really, really well. So that's what we're bringing back. And again, how do people feel about it?
The only thing I would add, the one thing I want to add is, first and foremost, Sarah's done a phenomenal job of getting these conversations almost verbatim onto the paper, which is really impressive and much appreciated. And it really was a good conversation, bless you, with Lissa, and personally, I feel good about, because we were kind of not sure, okay, how's this gonna work? The last thing we want is staff to say A and we like B. But it sounds like that's very much accounted for in their entire method. So I feel really good about what she shared and the method that she's proposing. But again, I was heading into a tournament game, one of the ones that Orono High School won. So it's nice to have that Sarah put this all captured it all so well.
I think you have done really well articulating what was shared and leaning on the expertise of the search consultant that we're paying to guide us through this process, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Well organized.
Seems good to
I
me.
feel very comfortable with this as delineated. I think it'd be great. And I like the idea of picking maybe some of the other town members and adding them to that. Do you guys like that? Like the ones who wanted to be on the committee and couldn't, along with town staff, if the staff.
Well, some of them are town staff, so hopefully
yeah,
maybe
great.
that could be
Yeah,
the town
yeah,
staff,
yeah.
because senior staff will all be in this other. Like senior staff couldn't do it because they'll be in the.
Not just senior staff.
No, I didn't mean on the committee. I meant there'll be a question and answer session with senior staff, which is a separate station. So senior staff couldn't be the ones who were leading the tour because they're somewhere else. So we'll have to not be senior staff. And we do have some non-senior staff who volunteered. We had so many that we couldn't put them all on the advisory committee. So it'd be great if one of them could potentially be involved in that.
I'm curious about the structure for the community meet and greet with multiple candidates. Presumably that ends up being a little bit of a longer event where we have candidates rotate through in shifts, or how does that work?
So this is something that we probably will need to go back and just clarify again, but the first conversations we had with SGR a long time back, when they explained that, they said that that isn't a formal presentation kind of a meet and greet. That is really more like there's food, there are, sodas, and it is like every candidate is in their corner and people mill around and go meet them and ask them questions and chat with them.
So
is
all
how
the
they
candidates
described
are
it.
actually in the same room?
Yeah, they're all there at the same
Is
time.
that definitely done with here, or is that done with like there are 2 finalists or 3 finalists?
This is where there's 2 or 3 finalists. That's the stage we're at here.
Okay.
And so there might be 2 of them, there might be 3, I don't know, but they described it all as happening all at once early in my conversations with them, all in the same room. We can cycle back around and double check all that with Lissa, but that's my understanding.
Good question.
Any thoughts, Rob? You
I
feel
just think my head went to like all of the candidates all like eyeing each other, getting a page match or something.
Yeah.
But I like this idea, not that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it being awkward for some candidates and also no more so than like, I've applied for the same job as my friends before and just navigating that, it's part of life, I guess. So,
We'll make everybody feel welcome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, Cornell had indicated at one point that you felt like this structure seemed pretty good from a staff perspective, but I guess I just want to ask again, like, this feels pretty good from a staff perspective, no major concerns or things flagged?
Yeah, no, this is
Okay.
a fine process. The meet and greet portion I've done for but we did it on different evenings. So you were the only one in the room
Hmm.
and the other candidate the the night before. So we weren't head to head.
We I don't remember, did she described it, but I wonder if they could cycle them in and
I
out
mean,
or something.
maybe.
Did she?
She didn't yet, and I did ask early because I was a little surprised about it too, but then, I asked my sister who's in one of these management kind of positions. She's like, no, I've done those before, so I think they're not unusual necessarily, but we didn't actually ask about this in our last conversation. We certainly can cycle back again. I mean, I don't think we have 2 rooms, it's just not like you could really move from room to room, I think and I think
Well,
multiple nights would be,
Too.
I think the multiple nights would be difficult with the schedule where everyone's flying in to do these scheduled stations kind of in a day, and SGR is only here for a certain number of days. So I imagine we're probably stuck with one night, and it's just a question of how we structure that night, but maybe it doesn't have to all be the same time. Maybe one could be at 6 and one could be at 7. I don't know, but the public will get tired at some point if they get dragged out too long. So I guess I'm thinking we should maybe ask SGR for a little more information on this, and I can bring this back to council again.
It does seem a little like, it does seem a little awkward to have everyone in the same room. If there's only gonna be 3 of them, maybe we could cycle through and it's 30 minutes here and then maybe 20 minutes somewhere, and you just kind of use time to space it out instead of,
Sure.
I think the public could ride out 9. I mean, you wouldn't get as much time to meet people.
But the flip side is if we're milling around and you really want to have a good conversation with somebody, it's better you have a chance to do that when there's a longer, right, period of time. If you're a member of the public and there's 3 candidates, you have more chance to speak with each of them if the, time period. I mean, it's the same 30 people in the public who then have to cram in their conversation into half an hour with somebody as opposed to an hour with spread over 3. There's more chances for more people, I think, is the downside.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need to decide that tonight. I think we just need to know if we basically feel good with this sort of 4-station rotation. And Leo and I can follow up with Lisa for a little more conversation about the meet and greet night for the public.
Yeah.
Does everybody feel comfortable with that?
That sounds good. And I think, this meet and greet thing, I'm skeptical it will find a better solution than this one, but open to hearing it. They have any other ideas?
It could be, maybe it's a tour of town with like a half an hour block for the meet and greet. In among the 3 things, maybe it's half an hour you're on that side of town, half an hour you're here with us in this room, and half an hour you're, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of different ways you could do it, but what makes the most? But if you guys bring it back to us, I'm sure we'll
Okay.
be amenable.
We're pretty good with the 4 different stations with senior staff in one, advisory committee in another, council in a third, and a tour of a town going on that hopefully will be led by some little group of folks who will include for sure a staff member, but probably also at least one community member, probably someone who volunteered to be on the advisory committee, and maybe a third person who has some university connection or expertise. That part we feel good about.
Yep.
I feel
Okay.
good about that.
All right, great. Then the third point will come up next week. I will send out for you all, there are 2 documents for semifinalist questions. We have to talk about these in executive session because these are in fact the interview questions that will be used. So this can't be talked about at a public meeting. But just so you know, there are 2 separate lists. One list is a list of written questions, which each semifinalist candidate who's chosen will be asked to write us written responses back, somewhere from 15 to 20 questions. And a different list is the questions that they will record themselves answering. And that list, I believe, has about 8 question option on it, and we need to pick between 2 to 4. So just so folks are aware, that's what you'll be looking at. I'll send some instructions with the email. Please be aware that those questions are also, apart from the fact that it would be very unwise for us to let them out to the public so people would know ahead of time what they were gonna be, they are also proprietary property of SGR, those lists. So they are confidential and please treat them that way. And there was something else about that. Oh, when you look at them, there are, I think, 15 possible written questions or 16 on the list. We're allowed to go up to 20. So keep in mind that if we cannot decide on only 2 or 3 or 4 oral ones we want, we can move some of those over to the written list and make it go up to 20, if that makes sense. So it is possible to get most of the questions in if you absolutely love them all, but it's also possible to eliminate, and it's possible to add questions that are not on there at all. So this is where I just want you guys to think about that, especially maybe to review when you look at them, our job description that we spend so much time on based off the community survey results that came in and feedback from the public about what we're looking for in our manager in Orono. So that's the kind of thing where there might be a very specific question that really fits into kind of our vision of who we want to be as a town that is really represented in those documents, that we might want to have a question that really is, you know, tied to that. So feel free to write your own question that isn't on there and bring that to the meeting also next week. Does that make sense? Everybody's good? Okay, and then the last one, Leo and I have our first meeting with the advisory committee on Wednesday this week, 2 days from now. This is a meeting where most of the meeting will be, a lot of it will be in small groups, talking with each other. It will be some time for them to take a look at the brochure and the survey results and these same questions that I just talked to you about, these written questions and semi-finalist questions. So it'll be a chance for them to take a look and give feedback to us about a couple of them they truly love, something they think is missing that ought to be there. So by the time we meet next week to talk, we'll also have information from the advisory committee and their input to us to consider as well. So that's great. It means that almost that entire meeting will be in small groups and or discussing something that's confidential that cannot be broadcast. So the only part of this meeting that could potentially be broadcast would be maybe like the first 5 to 10 minutes where we're introducing the process to them and they're introducing themselves and why they wanted to serve on this committee, probably literally 5 to 10 minutes. So the only question here is, do we want to broadcast 5 to 10 minutes of that and that's work for staff, or do we feel like that meeting is not needing to be broadcast at all?
It feels like a lot of work for 10 minutes, but.
Thanks.
You should probably just notice it as per usual.
Yeah, so anyone who wanted to come, it was noticed, they can show up for that first 5 to 10 minute part. They theoretically can also sit here during the small group part when everybody's in little pairs or trios. The public could go in their own pairs and trios and chat if they wanted, but then we will come to a part where the public, if they're here, will need to leave because we'll be looking at these confidential interview questions.
Work with Amanda on an agenda. Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, I've created one that I've shared with Leo.
Does she have?
No, and I can get it to you and to
Yeah,
her, but
you know,
it's not the sort of thing that, again, we have a lot of detail in it that probably is not what you want. You're saying what could go out to the public, right?
Yeah, we gotta notice.
Yeah. So,
So if you
Can
just
get
work on that,
that
get it to me.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get that to you probably by the end of the day tomorrow. Just take this headings and take out the details, right, Leo?
Yeah.
Okay, does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Everyone good with that?
I'm glad we talk about it in terms of like why, whether it should be public, but
Right.
it's the right decision.
So the public is welcome to come for the beginning part, and then at some point, if they're here, that'll become the equivalent of an executive session. It won't be that because it's not council, but it'll be confidential meeting for the second part. And the NDRs are all ready to be signed. The non-disclosure agreements will all be there, ready to be signed on Wednesday.
I think she's made copies of everything we had.
I didn't send the non-disclosure. You guys had the most
Yeah,
recent
she
version of
has it.
that?
She's
Yeah.
made, she sent one to Mr. Perry.
Perfect. Right. So the non-disclosure agreements will all be signed on Wednesday before we look at any of these questions or any of that, so that everyone is clear that this stuff is confidential and can't go anywhere. Great. We good? Leo, anything else that I'm forgetting about Wednesday?
Nope, you nailed it,
Okay, that's it.
per usual, Sarah. Great, thank you so much, Sarah. Do we want to insert in here, is there any public comment with regards to this whole last discussion?
Yeah, I guess without disclosing what you can't, is there any interests, like in our position,
Good point.
just generally.
Good point.
Good question.
Are we allowed to just say how many applicants there currently are? I assume, I don't know.
I don't see why the delegates is.
Would that-
Cornell?
Usually you announce how many you have.
Okay.
When it's.
Done. Okay,
So
so I guess
we
not.
have
I guess we're supposed to wait. We do have candidates.
We have candidates.
That we can say, I think.
It's not too late if you want to get your resume in.
It's plural.
Right, but anyone who's still interested in applying, please do.
Yeah.
Anyone listening?
So the big push though is through the 14th of March, is that right? The
I believe it closes on the 14th. Is that right? I was trying to remember, is it 14th or 15th? I think it's the
the first
14th.
review of applications, right? So it's not closed. Does it not close? Is
I
there a
believe it's
difference?
closed on the 14th because, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
That is a good point. I don't know what would happen if someone submitted one after that. I know we pick our semifinalists on the 20th. So it'd be difficult if it, I mean, I believe it wants
We have a
SGR
schedule where.
to close on the 14th because they compile a packet for us at that first, on March 20th. We as a council and as an advisory committee will not have seen anything in writing from the applicants. SGR will bring and present to us live every applicant. And that has to do with confidentiality of applicants and their remaining as anonymous as possible for as long as possible.
Mhm.
So we see nothing to the 20th, but SGR works hard between the 14th and the 20th to organize that presentation for us. They sort the applicants into these we believe are the top tier 1 candidates. These we think are your middle tier candidates, and these are the ones that we would not recommend.
Yeah.
And they present every candidate to us, regardless of which category they've placed them in. So I believe it really, people do need to apply by the 14th because
Absolutely.
SGR needs the time between the 14th and the 20th to prepare their presentation for us. Does that help, Dan?
It does.
Mitch is nodding, so he thinks
Yeah.
that's how it works too. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah. And we want to be fair to the process that we've published and.
So really the 14th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Thanks, Belinda.
Do we want to insert the grant request in this? Do we want to talk about that? We typically have been, I think, when we've been seeing them, there was
You
new
want to
grant.
be shared
request.
today?
Yeah, maybe. I also think there was some part of the council chair report that was going to include kind of a report, or maybe not council chair, maybe town
Yeah,
manager
managed
report that was going to include kind of some follow-up and feedback to the Route 2 corridor. So I'm sort of wondering if we should do that first, just to see how long that takes, that
Okay.
discussion before. Does that seem okay, Leo?
Sure.
Before we go there, I know it's not on the agenda, but the comp plan committee suggestions that I asked for council last week, one of you has responded to me. That would be Sarah. So if you all could give me some suggestions, that would be really wonderful, so I can sort of coordinate with Mitch. Although, again, we'll see if, after tomorrow, if one of you needs to take on this work, but.
We can draft you to do it no matter what happens
Oh,
tomorrow, right?
can you?
No, I probably can't do that. So
I don't know.
Selective service type
Right.
situation.
But anyway,
You'd really like them by like tomorrow, Rob, or Wednesday? When would you like them?
Yeah, I think tomorrow would be great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Well done, Sarah, with the deadline tomorrow. Got it.
Tell who used to teach school.
Yeah.
So do we want to do a route, is that where we are?
You did it. First of all, you did. I mean, it was
Amazing.
great turnout, a
Yeah.
lot of energy in the community. And everything was, I thought it was really well done, right up to the point where I outed the fact that we were gonna have a meeting with the trained people that we're actually not gonna have on the 11th, so I apologize about that. But I thought, I thought it was phenomenal.
So I asked Cornell to just have an opportunity to talk, because like you said, very well attended, probably 40 to 50 people. And just an opportunity to listen, and we did a lot of listening. I think that obviously all that information is going to be compiled with a consultant to go back to look at how we start putting this together. I think one of the things that I did wanna also say that sometimes gets lost in this is that this is an infrastructure project. So there's infrastructure that we don't talk about all the time, but stormwater, fixing the the sewer pipes and some other pieces of that corridor that need to be addressed. And all that stuff will be in that project, but this was really more about the safety of the corridor and what people would like to see, which usually is after all that other stuff is done. So the frosting on the cake, if you will. So the other thing that I did want to bring up is that obviously in that meeting, for those that were in attendance, there was some conversation, especially towards the end, about kind of low hanging fruit and some people having some concerns. And I have spoken with both Rob and Dan Merrill, Chief Merrill, about some of the things that were brought up in that. We have reached out to our vendor as it pertains to our lighting system and our pedestrian crossing to see what changes could be made in the short term and look at some other things. So and then also Dan looking at collecting data around speeds and things like that and how we can do that. So we're developing a plan that we would come back to you with. There probably is going to be some cost to that, but it certainly could fall into the ARPA funds to do that. So looking at lower cost, immediate fixes that might help that be a little safer in the corridor. So wanted to let you guys know that we were responding to that, knowing that if there were ways that we could fix things in the short term that weren't going to be issues that you've spent money that then is just going to get ripped up and you're going to do other things with. That's kind of what we're looking at right now to see how we can do that. So hoping to bring that back as soon as possible with some suggestions about what we might be able to do.
I don't want you to get too worried about ripping certain things up. The reason being is this is like, we got 5 years out. So if there's some things that would really make a huge difference safety wise, that maybe is in the tens of thousands of dollars, that might be.
So just,
yeah, I know.
these are very low hanging fruit,
Okay.
quick things.
Yeah.
Cost of somebody to do the quick work. It's not, we're not talking about taking anything out, ripping anything out. We're really talking about very small steps that may have impacts or allow us to get data to do that. Cause I think that probably wouldn't be cost effective to look at larger.
I personally am not worried about, like, let's say we put flashy signs up in places. That's me, because I feel like over a 5-year period, if that saves one life, that's worth it, even if we have to rip the whole thing out when we do the corridor. But that's just me. You guys can disagree with that. But so I would consider that being a small thing. Is that part of the scope of that, or is it just like?
Part of what the consultant is now going to do is take all that information and actually put it against data they've collected in the corridor. Okay, so that it matches. So
Gotcha.
as we know, people say that is the most dangerous section of this that could ever have lived. And while everybody's got that dangerous section, we can't fix it all. So they're gonna go back and take all the data that they've collected and kind of put things in buckets to try to figure out where these could go and what could be low hanging fruit that we could do.
I gotcha.
We know that, whether it's, I don't want to speak for Chief Merrill or anybody else, but looking at, are there things that we can do in that corridor that are just part of what we're doing and just shifting how we do it to be able to get some more data that help with those things like speed, because that's not something that the consultants would look at.
Right.
That is something they would. So we're looking at those options and trying to figure out bang for your buck there.
Yeah, thank you.
And lower cost and looking at where are the things that need to be addressed and based on the.
And then you may not have it right now, and that's totally fine. They may not know. I just know that people will ask me right away, is there a timeline for that part of it with the consultants? Is it like, are we talking months out on that?
In that, they're looking to bring something back in June with some more, some types of rendering and some ideas that would solve some of these pieces. But like I said, it's part of that whole, there's a number of things that run into this whole project. Long corridor, a lot of infrastructure stuff too that are.
The one thing I really liked that I heard from Bob Close, and it was quickly shut down by maybe the DOT guy or something, was the idea of burying the the power lines. And he seemed it was pretty clear cut according to him. Which struck me as a little strange because certainly I would think you could I mean, if this is about safety, I guess I don't remember what the whole theme of these grants were. It's about safety? Is that?
So yes, that's part of it is safety and infrastructure and pedestrian safety. It's multimodal is what they call it. How do you get all the people working together to move through a corridor?
Yeah. Well, for bike, they talked about different things with bike lanes. It struck me as a little odd that couldn't be incorporated. Getting rid of poles couldn't be incorporated into the whole multimodal, because it's gonna give you,
So-
this big, it's gonna give you this much space.
I hear what you're saying. Comes down to federal funding. And the
Yeah.
federal funding won't allow it. Now, if that is something that council felt strongly about, and wanted to look at other ways to fund that during this project,
Mhm.
much like, they're not gonna put new sewer lines in it for us, but when it's all ripped up, we're gonna put our sewer lines in, right? So,
Yeah.
I think that's like like these lights down here, I think are a huge game changer. I think it looks beautiful when you go around town looking down here. So I mean, personally, I'm interested in that aspect. And I also think that aspect is just, we're gonna be struggling for space. I have no idea what their plans are for space. I know it's not eminent domain, or I hope it's not eminent domain, so that's probably not it. So we've got a finite amount to work with. And poles are in the way. If you've ever walked on Main Street at the top of that hill, the plow can't get through there. It's kind of a mess right there.
so that absolutely, I mean, if you wanna look at that, I don't know how much that is part of the scope. That's part of the challenge is if it can't do it, then the scope of the consultant. But if that's something outside of that I can work with our staff to see if there's anybody that can kind of research to see what might be available. I can't guarantee anything, and that is, just so we're clear, pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And it takes up a lot of space that people don't understand, is that there are, in the ground, you have to create these pits where everything
And
connects.
then you have areas that everybody's home and all that goes with that. So there's a lot you can.
What I would say to you is that there are ways in which working within the current right of way, that we can get the poles so they're not in the middle of the sidewalks, okay? So I hear what you're saying. And I'm not telling you that we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are ways to make that work within the current right of way that, although they didn't do that when they built it the last time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know how much it's worth chasing down, because if it's just like blows the budget out of the water, there's no point. But I really do. I think I think we should petition the federal government to use some common sense, but.
On a ratepayer advisory committee within the region's power grid manager, and have a meeting for that on Wednesday. So I can ask some people where this comes from and at least learn more about it.
Yeah.
I'll report back.
And if there's any.
And if they wanted to
Right.
bury it, they were excited about.
I'll find out where the pinch point within the system is, so that we would know.
You can ask. Person.
Yeah.
Such a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it,
Hang those nice signs for state championship basketball.
True, that's true.
they can use my tree.
Still be streetlights.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, if they're gonna do it, that's when you
Yeah,
gotta
right.
do
It's
it.
great if you can inquire though about where the
Well,
pinch point is and
yeah.
are there grant sources
Yeah.
for that or?
Who even is it? Is it FERC? Like, who is holding up the works here? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just on the scheduling
Oh,
part,
yes.
Matt's question about folks wanting to know when the consultants would be bringing back the rendering. First of all, I'm so appreciative
Yeah.
and of you guys already being all over this low hanging fruit discussion. This was a very short time ago that this
Yeah.
meeting happened, so I think
Thank
it's
you.
really impressive that you've already talked to Dan and Rob and they already have thoughts and someone's already talked to the lighting vendor or is about to. I mean, this is great. Thank you. I guess I wondered when you mentioned there'd be a plan coming back from staff around some of this low hanging fruit we might do. Is there a vague idea of when that plan might come to us?
In all honesty, I mean,
Who knows?
we just.
Okay.
Literally, the turnaround time was I had a conversation on Friday with
Excellent.
Rob and Dan, and we're trying to put that together. So I don't have as quick as we can.
Okay.
Depending upon what it to also, what the vendors that we would have to deal with in the lighting, for the traffic lights, what
Yeah.
their schedule is. We're waiting to hear back from them as well to see what they could do.
That's great. And I had one other question, which was on the low hanging fruit discussion. Because it was all the things you mentioned. I mean, it seemed really clear that lighting timing was a big thing. And so you're already talking to the vendor about that. And I heard that with Chief Merrill, you're talking about data collection on speed, but could we also get a plan back from Chief Merrill maybe about, people talked also just about more enforcement efforts around speed. And in specific, I think quite a few people brought up, would it be possible to partner with the police so that there were community volunteers like crossing sidewalks at certain times? So, because if you stand at a crosswalk, literally 10 cars go by you, 15. If there was a police car anywhere nearby, they'd have their pick of who they wanted to stop. So could there be some plan back from Chief Merrill also about how we might either increase speeding, ticketing, and or partner with community members to have some times when we really focus in on ticketing folks who aren't stopping on crosswalks? Could that be part of the plan that comes back if you
I
ask?
mean, I can talk to him.
I think that would be great, because part of what people's discussion was not, wasn't so much how to slow down the speeds structurally, but could we partner with our police force, who are amazing, to make it easier for them to, have times when it's easy to issue a lot of those tickets real fast, and in a short amount of their day, they've accomplished a lot on that front, if they partner with, some community volunteers and pedestrians to do it. So thanks. That would be great. I'd appreciate that too. And I think everyone at the meeting was great, and you guys are doing a terrific job.
That
So
was
thanks.
Thank you so much, man.
interesting comments about enforcement and Orono creating this reputation that basically VZ has, and VZ has it from 1985, as far as I know, and it's still in my head. I don't even know if it's true anymore, but
You
it
outed yourself for a
it is in my head.
I
so
won't
it's
say it in
fun.
public.
Yeah.
It is certainly what people think. that they
Yeah.
go through.
Yeah. And I don't love the idea of turning up the heat on people coming through town either. Obviously, we don't want them speeding, but being that town, that can be taken too far, 28 and everyone's getting tickets. I think, there's probably a happy medium in there where it's warning, warning, warning ticket, or warning, warning ticket, or warning ticket or something,
Well, the nice thing compared to 85 is that the students anyway, and younger folks, and I think even folks in our generation nowadays, once any ticketing starts, everyone puts it on their Instagram and their Facebook and their text messages, and it doesn't take half as much time as it used to build that reputation. It spreads pretty fast.
And I'd like to report that Matt did stuff for me in the crosswalk the other day. He wasn't on his phone, so we're making progress with Matt.
So I still have my headphones on.
If people are still on the topic, I would like to see us package something with the work that the staff's already started, what we heard from the community and what we'll get back. And thank you for, Pete, thank you for the videos up on the YouTube page, which makes it much easier for other people to find. And I'm gonna go through the transcript and try to identify some common themes that we heard from people. But I think it would make sense for us to think about, as part of this budget season, some kind of, I know I'm always trying to name stuff, and please, the eye rolling can begin now, but some kind of like summer of safety thing where we talk about things that we're gonna finish, we're gonna finish the speed bumps, we're gonna finish the work on Forest Avenue this summer. We're gonna have some of these initiatives that are low hanging fruit, but some of the things we heard about that potentially we could do off the corridor that would make some sense. And I think we ought to be really intentional about how we communicate this work back to people in a way where we package it. And then we declare that this is our intention as a community to address some of these things that, perhaps been because of either funding or resources and competing, but we heard people and we are doing these things, we're making these investments and we're making these changes in how we operate to do the best that we can. And, we welcome students back in the fall with kind of a welcome back, but, speed enforcement type thing, or education about crosswalks in Orono and why they matter. Stuff like that. We could go a long way to communicating that the citizens of Orono were heard or are being heard if we did that in an intentional way. So that's something I'll be thinking about as we go into the budget and work on this stuff.
Thanks, Dan. That's great. I had an interesting conversation at the Historical Society. Megan might know more about this. So I'm looking at Megan. But I also appreciated at the meeting that it was a meeting where we were supposed to think big and not be editing ideas out, right? Because it's the first meeting. And I thought that was great and really wonderful how you facilitated that, Mitch. And I know I brought up that maybe we should have a pedestrian bike bridge. It's not our pinch point bridge across. Then I was at the Historical Society and I found a Tough End newsletter from the 80s and 70s where they were advocating to get back a pedestrian bike bridge that used to exist from the Tough End to Webster at some point in time. Do you know when that was?
I don't know when
Or
it
do you
was,
know
but
when
I've
that
seen
was,
the
Megan? You've
structure
seen
that's
photos
left
of it?
there.
I know that it was quite a long time ago. And the bridge downtown used to be tolled. And the bridge down at that end was not tolled, so it was a little bit more accessible.
It was a
for
walkable
folks.
bridge without a toll when
Yes,
the other one had a
so-
toll. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. It's interesting that things cycle around, right? And that folks have been advocating for some of those things.
They
for a
won't let
while.
us put a toll on the bridge now, will they, Megan?
That's not.
Slash everyone's property taxes free. Yeah. Free for Orono residents, of course. Yeah.
There's also trolleys and many other things in town, different train tracks and
$3
things
to
that.
go across.
Suggested we get a
Get off
trolley.
the island, $3 to go on it.
Free back to get on.
Yeah.
But I also, Dan, I appreciated your comments around like summer of safety and, I hear you, Leo, about not like coming down too hard, but I also don't think of like the patrolling of speed and crosswalks as a punitive thing. I think of it honestly as nobody wants to be the person who hit the person in the crosswalk. And to me, it is a service to everybody that we get everybody going at the speed that's safe and stopping where it's safe. Since the meeting, I had 3 different people in town approach me with their stories of people being hit in crosswalks over the years. And it was freaky, right? To hear those for me. And I'm, so I don't know it's a punitive thing. I think it's to like help everybody not be that person who has that accident that no one wants to have.
Yeah, and I guess I was less about the crosswalks than it was about speeding, and I was more thinking, you can go, 26, 27.
Sure.
That stuff is not a good look, I think.
I think the other thing that was interesting, and it's interesting to note, having this kind of transition with Rob, I asked him a few questions and people were rightfully frustrated that they've been on a couple of committees to try to fix these problems. And in the past, we developed plans without funding at the end of the plan, right? This is a process that has a high rate of success with funding at the end. But the other thing that Rob said to me was the fact that a lot of these kind of pulled at the strings, and when, like the pool, when you start pulling at things, you're finding more and more challenges within it. And one of the ways that you slow traffic down is not in the downtown. It's before you get here, and that's why the corridor is so long. It's looking at how do you look at this as a whole piece and work it together so that you can start people slowing down when they get off Kelly Road. And by the time they get down here, we've created a corridor that slows everything down. And it moves people through in multiple ways, whether it be walking, biking, or driving. I don't think we're ever gonna be able to stop the driving, so we have to figure out how to work with that. So I think that's something that is hard because you say, well, if I fix this right here, well, yeah, but if you fix this, it's connected to all these other pieces. And we have to be careful about, that's why we're looking at the whole.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic initiative. It's gonna
Yeah.
change
Really good.
Orono for the
Generation.
good for a long, long time to come.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Was there any additional town manager updates?
Just before we, sorry, I'll go first. Orono Historical Society meets tomorrow at 6:30. Since you mentioned that, just wanted to, if anybody who wants to join us, 6:30 tomorrow at the Birch Street School.
I know there's no town manager update, but I had a quick question from your weekly update, Cornell. I saw that the town council needs to complete an ICS 402. And I was curious if you could supply a little bit more info about how we get signed up to do that.
Oh, Chief Lowe will just conduct a class or have a
Okay,
staff.
so we
person conduct the
can
class,
expect to
yes.
hear from him about
Oh,
the
yeah.
scheduling of that. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And will it happen during a typical
Probably
meeting
a committee
time?
meeting.
Okay, so we don't have to book something else in our schedule. Some of us were trying to figure that out too. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I had something else for under the town manager's report. What do we as of tomorrow at 8 o'clock, we're not gonna have a town chair. So is all things fall to Leo in that regard until we have our town chair election? Is that the way we do things or how we,
My understanding till your meeting on the 11th.
that work?
And so we should be prepared for a council chair election on that meeting on the 11th.
Please,
Great.
Shelley's been on an
Wonderful.
agenda item for that.
Great.
We did council chair, vice chair. Did we also do committee chairs at the same time or did they come
I
later
think they were appointed after.
afterwards?
Yeah, I don't think
That's
we
true.
voted on them.
Well, I think there's like a survey, this is the last 2 years that I've been on, we've had a survey that goes out sent by the town manager and the chair. Asking what people's interests are and then sort of suggestions are made and then we vote on it.
That works.
But I don't know if, I'm not necessarily adding that to your work plan, I'm just saying that's what
No,
we've
I'll just
done.
ask about how it's been done in the past.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know, and I think that's great. I know for me, like, I've liked it that we've really worked as a council to spread and power share out as much as possible. So I really love that and I hope we keep doing that. I like it that we have everyone different in charge of committees and
Yeah.
you all do a great job.
I like the work group approach that we have too, in terms of, a couple people really take some ownership of something and then bring it in and, that you trust someone's getting it done and, I think it's very helpful.
The end of the town council chair and town manager updates. Now it's 6:26. Would it make sense to take a quick look at the mini grant?
Mini grant application that just came in.
I feel like Leo's really warmed up to these mini grants for.
Hey, I'm just trying to be consistent.
I like it.
We pump them out.
You're
Yeah.
doing great. So this is the one that came in about
Maine Yoga
Therapeutic.
Adventures. right?
therapeutic adventures at the Keith Anderson and locally outdoors, combining meditation, gentle yoga, sometimes partner yoga to get the community breathing and moving, offering up vegetarian food. Wow, there's food included in this, mostly sourced from the Orono's Farmers Market. And taking it outdoors for a stroll along the river. Correct? That's the one we're
Yeah.
looking at?
That's correct.
Yes. Since Megan is here, Megan, if you don't mind, if that's okay, how does it work with, how does it work with someone, is this a commercial application, who's gonna pay you pay rent to use thank you for coming up, is gonna pay to use the Keith Anderson building, or would they be comped the space as part of this proposal?
So if you want that in part of the mini grant application,
Mhm.
I would probably recommend council make that discretion. The things that would include is, one, there has to be available space. We do take bookings out, so we would have to work together in terms of an agreement of when that person or entity would be in that space. Currently, when people approach the Parks and Rec Department about ideas, especially classes that might be available, some of which may be free. We are in the current model, we are able to adjust rates or have free rates potentially. Usually that has to mean the event is free and open to the public. If you want to charge a rate, there is an entity right now that has a discounted rate, but because of that discount, they're able to offer scholarships to people who might want to try that program. The other thing they have to do is advertise. So if you're able to use the town entity for free, you have to be able to provide me with advertisements so I can hang them up around town, or show me that you're putting in some effort into advertising your event. So we are pretty flexible.
For the public.
For the
So
public,
broader,
it has to be
yeah,
for the
if you-
public. For instance, if you wanted to do, sometimes, right, you might want to do something for children. So yeah, maybe the person who's in the senior citizen might not want to attend such an event, but we try and be flexible as to what you're actually looking to be offering. If you're looking to only offer an event for first grade girls and that's it and it's restrictive, that's a different situation. So there's being reasonable as to what you're presenting to us. The other thing that we need is insurance. So that is not something that I can be flexible on based on the current standing of our leases and our
Yeah.
insurance agreements for the
Yeah.
town. So that is something they need. If they already have insurance, if they're something like a business, they can claim the town as an additional insured party and meet our minimums.
Yeah.
I'm not an insurance expert, but I have worked with insurance for quite a while in this department and have an understanding. Ours are a reasonable rate. Seemingly, most insurance policies are around $1 million, ours are 400,000. So it's
Coverage.
for coverage, for liability to building coverage and bodily injury coverage. So those are pretty reasonable from what I've seen. Everyone's a little bit different. Everyone has a little bit of a different plan, but it's not outlandish. We're not asking from 5 million some odd dollars.
Yeah.
So if you don't have insurance, if you're someone, maybe you have a birthday party, right?
Yeah.
You might not have insurance. A private family might not have insurance. I always recommend reaching out to your homeowners or renters insurance policy because sometimes they have clauses for municipal or community buildings. Or they might be able to sell it to you at a discounted rate because you're already their customer. So it's always good to ask.
Yeah.
Not guaranteed, but good to ask. The other thing that the town works with MMA is to provide one-time event insurance. So we have all of our buildings are set up through that entity. So I'm able to provide that link to folks. They can click through the steps and they get a free quote. Usually that cost is around $75.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're doing something like breakdancing or like martial arts where there's,
Yeah.
right, there's a logical higher cost or higher risk, exactly. There, it does bump up slightly depending on your activity, but most of them fall in that it's not guaranteed.
Thanks.
So the one thing I would suggest as it pertains to the mini grants is that if your expectation is that staff will come.
Yeah.
Make use of this.
Yeah.
That you clearly articulate that.
Yeah.
I didn't hear if staff what?
Oh, if your expectation is that the space would be comped.
Oh.
That you clearly articulate that, because then that doesn't put the onus on staff
Yeah.
to make that decision, especially where you have private entities versus private companies versus an individual resident or things like that.
So you said current model twice when you talked. I'm gonna ask, I'll ask it through Cornell, I guess, but then I would love you to think about, and all of the dealings you've had with people in the community, I'd love us to think about if it might be opportunities to update the current model. And I mean this in like the most supportive, you have a set of rules that you play by, and I think every time I hear from somebody about, I work with Parks and Recs, and they work with you, they have like very high praise for how responsive and kind you are. But I would, if you think you're up for it, and Cornell, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the current model could be updated to reflect better, reflect the types of things that people, that lower any barriers that some people seem to think some people feel they run into in that regard. So I don't know if it's like, I'm not suggesting we throw out the current playbook or anything like that, but if there are improvements and if we could consider that as part of our budget discussions, I would certainly be open to it. I'm just speaking as one person.
And you're saying because it obviously might have a higher cost, so you're thinking it would come back as part of the budget.
Yeah.
What that additional cost would be. Okay.
Do you have examples of what those barriers would be? So
Well,
that,
just like the $70 for an event, or if there's a an hourly charge for the Keith Anderson building. I understand, as I understood it, and Megan was here before, and then Megan's a great example of, she had a program that got spun up and then it got it's now funded through Parks and Rec, right? The skiing program. And I think about it in terms of, are there other things that people are trying to spin up that could come under the Parks and Rec umbrella without being a new burden for staff to run, right? I mean, I also hear, Mitch, what, we talked about last week in terms of, all right, well, people are going flat out. And this is not, hey, someone had an idea and they don't want to pay $30 an hour, or they don't want to, for the rental, or they don't want to pay $70 for the insurance. So now Parks and Rec has to do it. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm asking, because I truly don't know if there are opportunities where, the hourly, if the building's empty, and it's something that is a community, a program that brings people together. If it's, someone's trying to run a for-profit business out of there that's not really community oriented, then, that's not the right fit, but.
So can I ask again?
Sure.
If I'm understanding, so are you saying that, I'm assuming you're not talking about events that aren't free and open to the whole public. You're only talking about events that would be free and open to the whole public, that you would be interested in, because there's already no cost for the space with what Megan said. If it's an event that's open to the whole public and it's free without a cost. So there's already no barrier about any charge to use the space in that situation.
Sure.
So the only possible barrier left would be the insurance barrier potentially.
Potentially.
And I assume you're not talking about people who are then, I mean, no one would be included who's using it for a private family event because we're talking about free and open to the public.
Right.
So your question is there a way that for people who wanted to have a free, open to the public event, but might need insurance for that event, a one-time event might be $75, but a repeating event that happened every week, that insurance number could get pretty high, pretty fast. So you're looking at that. If council was willing to fund something toward insurance for those kind of events, would that lower barriers? And you're asking staff if they could bring us data or information about that, am I understanding?
So, but then there's also like, I saw someone, I think that might be it, but there's also like, if someone was looking for space in town to do something like a micro business though, that serves people in a way that's, like if Rob was gonna do music lessons in town and needed space and wanted to, I mean, it becomes cost prohibitive. You know what I mean? It's not like there's like almost like an artist type space or.
So we have that. The example I use with the group using scholarship. They have insurance, they are their own entity, they are teachers in a sense. They have a discounted rate. We met multiple times, we discussed what their program would entail, we discussed who it would serve, how they would advertise. So they pay a rate because they are a business, they are their own entity, they are paying teachers and staff and things, but their rate is discounted. So they're not paying the $30 an hour. They are paying a different rate with the agreement that they provide scholarships, that they advertise on their own. So there's that group specifically, that they do like a full day event now and then where they charge full price and it's kind of their own thing. They pay the regular rate for that. It's only their classes that are discounted.
Okay.
So we are able, so if it's helpful, what it sounds like is if I can maybe supply Cornell with the document outlining kind of how we approach things
Yeah.
to better council's understanding, would that be
That'd be wonderful.
a good
Yeah.
first step?
Yeah.
Part of our Your Voice Matters promise is to do, and this is gonna, keep it, understanding how much we're asking of people now because of, but part of that promise was, have one pagers or videos that easily explain how people are able to interact with communities, the community services they interact with the most. And that would be a perfect example of one that would be really helpful to have for us, I think, for other people too. But then, and if you think that insurance is something we need to dig into in terms of our budget, I just remember we talked about it with a lot of concern last year as we were looking at the budget last summer and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then we got that nice meeting where we got a lot of this information. But Megan, I do think that if, like, for me personally, if it's also true that, you know what, if council was willing to help out with the insurance cost to help lower that for people who want to do a really open to the whole community event that repeats once a week, and it is a barrier for them, to be able to afford that insurance. If that's a barrier and you think it might be, I would certainly love to hear that back, because there are events that I think are valuable enough to the community that we might want to consider as a council, whether we can lower that barrier.
And isn't that what the mini grants were all about as well? I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
$70.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Could be.
it
but
potentially could.
I'm
Yeah.
curious about the free and open to the public. I thought and how that works. If it's a free and open to the public and we agrees it's a service, is there a way that we just incorporate that into being a program and then they're not paying? No different than coaches that are coaching for rec that are, they're the ones showing up at the gym doing the coaching. Maybe we get some staff that's doing timer on the weekend or something like that, but does that happen? Can that happen where, okay, someone's willing, Jeff Wingard's willing to offer karate free, open to the public in that building? Would that theoretically easily be made into a rec program where Jeff isn't providing insurance at that point when it's a rec program, or no? Does that happen? Can it happen? Am I making sense?
You are making sense. You ask a lot of different questions right there. The whole scheme of things. So the soccer practice example, we have staff that is part of the university support we have through all that type of program. We have staff in ASA when we play basketball, during the weekends, during soccer practice, we have someone that is part of that supervisory role.
So
The
that, don't
reason-
just say that that's different than it used to be. Rec programs, I've coached many rec programs. I've never been employed here. And it was me coaching with a bunch of kids on
The
the.
coaches are not the employee. The employees have CPR training. They're meant to take care of the building. They handle equipment and materials. So the coaches no longer have to worry about where all the balls are, and if Jimmy's mom is late, how is he getting picked up? We have someone there to support the coaches. So there has been changes from a stereotypical rec model, if you will. We have a different system here to support our coaches and to support the programs that do go on. So it's different. It's been that way since I have joined staff, but in conversations with other rec directors and being part of, the main community in that sense, everyone does it a little bit differently. That's how we do it to support our coaches and to maintain those building relationships. So right now, with those free programs and why they need insurance, is we are not there. They come in and sign out a key. They provide the insurance information to me prior, and everything gets sorted out prior. Most of the time, I don't even handle the key. I create a form and they're able to come into the clerk's office and pick it up. Our Parks and Rec staff is often running around a good bit. So we are able to lean on some support here as well to make it accessible for people to come and get those keys and get the time, use the times that they need. So that is why those people need insurance, is because we are not currently set up to have a staff person manned at Keith Anderson and Birch Street during any
Right.
sort of event.
Yeah, okay, so, and again, I'm thinking how it used to be. I definitely have been in.
And
Ace Adams.
one other opportunity that exists for members of the public is to partner with a nonprofit or a business or somebody that has a policy that is helpful as well. And I know the Orono Contra Dance has partnered with the Wilson Center to be providing insurance, so that's how they're currently operating, for example.
I see. Okay, well, thank you. That's good
That's really helpful.
clarification, Megan.
Yeah. So I think like as a follow-up, because Mitch's point is great, like certainly somebody could apply for a mini grant and say, I'd like to run this program all year and this is, what the insurance piece of it would cost. It could be in the mini grant. That's totally true. I also guess what would be helpful to me would be to know how many programs that you have now that fit in this category of people who are offering programs through Parks and Rec for free to the whole community where they're providing their own insurance. I don't know if you have a sense of that, but I'm just curious how many of those exist. And, that gives us an idea if there's 7 of those happening once a week, what that insurance amount probably is. If all of those folks then applied for a mini grant to cover their insurance, I'm curious how much that would be. I feel like that might exceed our mini grant fund, and maybe that is a figure it'd be useful for council to have going into our budget discussions, because
Yeah.
if it's a priority of council to really keep furthering this idea that, community members can provide the volunteer labor to run a lot of this stuff, which takes burden off staff. Maybe we do want to invest another, I don't know what, 5,000, 10,000 in an insurance pot that people can apply for. I have no idea, but I think that info would be really helpful if it was something you could provide for budget season. Does that seem possible?
So to summarize, what I'll get to Cornell is currently how you approach building rentals, regardless of who you are, and then how you fall into that conversation, what the conversation happens and how you move forward. The other thing I can provide, which is often outlined in OMR language, is how there is what rec programs are here and what they are. So whether that is a contracted service, which Sarah, that was kind of like what you were describing, is that might be a contracted service that the rec department uses, versus when a rec staff is running a program, versus when you're just renting a building and you happen to be using the town of Orono space. So I'll help define those things, and then maybe we can come back with more specific questions to help
Great.
Yeah, I think this is great. I
Yeah.
think it's very helpful for us to understand. So thank you so much. And thanks Mitch in the
Totally
background.
sidetracked.
Yeah.
Really, but really helpful.
It is like, I mean, I can envision, we have these beautiful buildings where you can incubate businesses that spin out and get their own place eventually in a way, but you know, where it's like a community, it's like karate or something, like somebody says, I need to start a karate dojo, I got nowhere to be. Maybe that doesn't work, but they get insurance and they build their business, and now we have a taxpayer over here now that started in a small space and moved a few months later to a big space. That's just kind of how I can see it, and maybe that's like totally not doable in the town, and you can stop me right now and say, stop that.
So it's
Get that out of your head, and that's fine.
doable.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the challenge is you start to mix uses and
Yeah.
what values you have placed on a building, right? Is that if you want that to be a community space that somebody can
Yeah.
have a birthday party, if somebody's running a
Yeah.
business there that has to be there consistently, that changes what's
Sure.
available, right? So
Yeah, it's a
to
yin.
balance all those pieces and understand how do we want our buildings to be used? And certainly if somebody wants to start a business, you just send them to me and we'll figure out a way to get it.
But
I
I
think that's good, no.
But Matt, I also
Yeah.
think, with Dan bringing up like your voice matters,
Yeah.
sort of commitment that we have. We have as a council heard from lots of people about how much desire they have for more Parks and Rec, which you guys have been building up for the last few years and following that. And a lot of excitement every time there is a new program that's offered in one of our buildings. And I guess I haven't personally heard a lot of people in the community clamoring for, no, we really need that space for private birthday parties. So my impression is that I don't hear that. I hear more about wanting these kind of ongoing events. But certainly if other people are hearing that, that's important. And if staff is hearing that, that's important. Because I think you're right. At some point, then you have to weigh how much of this do you build up versus how much do you allow these spaces to be privately rented for private events. Personally, I'm more interested in them being as much as possible community-wide events that everyone can access. And I guess I would say to the public, if you're listening and you're not, and you feel more that you want space reserved for private events, please, write us and speak up about that.
Right to Sarah.
Sorry, okay, write me, but no, please write everybody.
Right us all.
And I did have some specific questions on this application whenever we're done and recycling back. This was so.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, and sorry for derailing that.
No, we all contributed to that.
That was great. And actually, Megan, I have one other thing that isn't this specific thing we said, but isn't this specific grant exactly either, but maybe I'll just ask, you mentioned the thing about folks, one of the things they're required to do if they're using the space with the discounted rent or the free rent, apart from it being open to the public, that they need to provide you information that you can advertise out, and Pete and other staff can help advertise out. So I'm assuming that that would also be true for mini grant folks who apply, that if they get you their information to you, to Pete, to Cornell, whomever, that staff want to advertise that out, correct? Because I've had someone asking me who's got a mini grant already, they have flyers and they said, how do I get these to town? Who's the appropriate person who would share them out? Should it go to Mitch? Should it go to Megan? Should it go to Pete? Like, where should those things go?
In regards to building rentals, it is very important that folks, and part of the agreement is they make their own advertisement. We don't necessarily have the bandwidth to make advertisements for everybody. The other thing I don't want to be confusing is when I do post something off of the rec site, I don't want it to be confusing, like, oh, the rec department is doing this. Makes much more sense to share a post or to share a link as to what's happening, rather than the rec looking like it's taking ownership of it. Flyers are usually a good way to get around some of those things. They can be hung up around town, the town office, library, things like that, where it's pretty obvious of who to contact and where to go. So in regards to mini grants, if they are looking in their buildings, I would be involved in the coordination of that anyway, to get the advertisement to me in regards to the building use. Maybe that doesn't apply to every mini grant, but in regards to building use, I would be involved.
Good, I did it right then, because the one who inquired was using the building, and I said, I'm not sure, but I think you should start with Megan and Pete and get it to them, and they'll tell you where it should go if that's not right. So, but they should be encouraged to develop their own flyer, their own advertising, and then share that with staff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, helpful.
Okay, thanks again. Back to this mini grant.
Sorry.
I think It was a little confusing how the pricing was. It looked like 1,200 divided by 300 times 4. But I think it's
I think that's
4
right.
times 300 equals 1,200. Is
Yeah.
that what they're?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had one question
That
on this.
Is 1,000 the limit?
1,000 is, so first, well, we didn't say it was a limit. We said
Oh,
preference given
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
to applications under 1,000. So they could do 3 instead of 4. Matt is waving over here. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
I guess I also wanted to ask Megan, it looked like they had an idea of wanting to do this on Saturdays in May. And it looked like they were, am I correct that they mentioned the Keith Anderson building? Do we know at the moment if Saturdays in May are booked?
I'd be happy to provide you with that information. I don't have the Keith Anderson schedule memorized right this moment, but that is easy to take.
Yeah. Because that was my other question was, are we sure that that space is available Saturdays in May? And my bigger question was more, just for me, a big priority on mini grants is always that I sort of like, I think staff has been talking about that they're open to the largest number of people possible. So there was no articulation in here that I saw about how many people max could participate in the program. And I think that I would feel differently if it turns out, well, the max number of people who could do this was 12 versus the max number of people who could do this was 60, right? So I kind of wanted to see if we could maybe go back to the person and find out, because I think that might be a lot of money to invest if the max number of people is 12, and it probably a very reasonable amount of money if the max number of people is, 50. That Keith Anderson's pretty big, so my guess is quite a lot of people. Webster Park is pretty big, so my guess is, but I guess I had some question on number. That's my only question.
And I was curious about, with the grant, does it matter if there's a fee? Do these funds reduce a fee for
For the building?
participants? No, for participants.
I was assuming there was no fee. I guess that's another question. I was assuming it was a free thing to the public because that's kind of what we've been putting forth, but we should probably double check.
Yeah, let's double check.
So, because it did so it's a for-profit business. So I think that's worth asking.
I think it wouldn't hurt to double check. My impression from reading it is that she's offering a program that is free to the public, and sort of knowing Holly a little bit, that's what I expect this is, but it wouldn't hurt to double check.
And then the
And
fourth thing might be.
From
we
our
might only look
perspective,
at
because
3.
I don't know how this plays out with the grant, because that really hasn't. There've been for-profit, we've done, it hasn't been a new program at times, so I feel like intentionally, we're fairly loose with that, so.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a good question to understand it, but, and we can address it, depending on what we hear.
Yeah.
Like, so if it's, oh no, it's, 35 a piece, then.
That's different.
is that-
Yeah.
And that's different,
That's
so
different.
yeah.
And I like, thank you. This is really clarifying to Amanda because I think as we go forward with the mini grants, we should stipulate the advertisement aspect of it. Within the grant, say and I think we did a little bit, but I don't remember if that was a big part of the rules for the grant, but just to make sure people understand that we're excited for you to do this, but part of you getting money is to advertise, and you're responsible for that, and we expect to see that happen.
So I guess my question would be, so that if you know Holly, or I would like not to always be me, like to divide up who follows up on the mini grant follow-up. I know Jeff did one. The questions I had written down was, we need to know if this would be free to the public participating. We need to know how many members of the public could participate each week. And is it the same people every week, or could it be a different batch each week? We need to know, Megan can let us know if the space is available on Saturdays in May. I mean, she doesn't specify a time, so maybe she's flexible as to time, and that might help. And then also we might want to follow up saying we might be more interested in funding 3 instead of 4 cost-wise. Is that something you're willing to do if you know Holly, or someone else? You know Holly, you know this?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Great.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Good.
Any public comment?
Let's vote.
What's that?
Remember to
Oh,
vote.
yeah, reminder,
Remember to vote.
vote tomorrow. Yes. Great.
Thank you.
Polls open at 7, close at 8. Vote early, vote often.
Thank you, Shelley.
And it's really cool if you've never done it and you're here when the polls close. It's kind of exciting to like watch the count. Shelley and her staff do such an amazing job. It's a very cool civic thing to see them in action.
All right, no further comments, we shall adjourn.
6 minutes early.
Yeah,
Let's go.
thanks, guys.
It's the Kenny touch.
Thank you so much.